EDL 853 Mod 1. My name is Erica Arnold. I am a native Central New Yorker. I have lived in, been teaching for the last 15 years since I've been in Kansas. My family here is my boyfriend Matt, and we also have a variety of animals. Zoe and Lola are both dogs. Jeter and Agori are cats. Bailey and Blake are turtles, and Lucky is my school hamster who is joining us for the summer. My hobbies are kayaking, camping, reading, and we have been enjoying traveling the country since we've been together the last few years. We haven't gone outside the country, but we have found a lot of really fabulous things to enjoy inside our country, and we continue to try to find those things here. My teaching background moves right into this mod. I am a special education teacher. I originally started as a marketing major when I first graduated high school, and I decided that I really, really did not like that at all. So when I sat and I thought about what should I do for a career, my school was a high school that had very good special education programs, and they were all self-contained programs, and they also bused a lot of the higher needs kids from local districts around us to our school as well. We did have a student that was in our class that for whatever reason I could calm him, and whenever he was having meltdowns, they would get me out of class, and I was able to take care of that. So I thought, well, maybe that's what I should be doing. And I really, really love being a special education teacher, although it has gotten a lot harder. I would like a break, hence me taking these administration classes. What I've seen throughout my 15 years of career, or even since I was in high school, which was a lot of years ago, as I said, I was a non-traditional student, there have been a lot of inclusion shifts. There was no inclusion when I was in high school with these students. They were in our building and we saw them, but unless you were fortunate like I was to have any interaction, you just didn't have interaction. Like I chose to have that interaction, so therefore I built those relationships, but if you didn't choose to do that, you just didn't have any interaction with the special needs kids in our building. By the time I decided to become a teacher and had went through student teaching and all that, fast forward 10 years later at least, and there's a lot of inclusion taking place. Some of the classes I did some student teaching in were self-contained, but there were inclusion pieces. My student teaching portion in a small school in upstate New York, very northern upstate New York, actually. They had a pull-out format there, so I was able to follow that when I did my special education student teaching. And then when I did my gen ed student teaching, which I needed to do in New York in order to get an undergrad special ed degree, I had kids in my class in a different school district that were also inclusive students. Excuse me. So for my article summaries and takeaways, for the first article, students need highly trained teachers to hold them to high expectations. So as a building leader, I think you need to foster diversity through all aspects of your school, from your staff to your students. When we think about inclusion, often we think about how we're including kids, but when I think about this as well, how are we including our staff to make them feel like they have an inclusive role within our building? So inclusive leaders, they value humans, they recognize fundamental human rights, and are cognizant of others' perspectives and complex systematic interconnections. That was a direct quote. I really, really like that, because that's just it. They value humans. It is not adults, it is not children, it is humans as a whole are being valued. We need to focus on children's abilities, not disabilities. And again, teachers need to be highly trained and skilled at delivering appropriate content with differentiation. What I see often with my gen ed teachers is that they'll ask me for different ways to differentiate within their classroom, But I also see a lot of teachers that just don't know how to do it, and they either kind of push it off to the side or they do pretending. And as much as I would love to have the time to go in and help them and to answer all their questions, trying to do my job with staff that we've had the last couple of years, we've had a lot of staff restrictions. I just don't have a lot of extra time to do that stuff as well. But the benefits of inclusion include student confidence, the communication, and their quality of education. They do so much better when they're able to be in the class. Now, I have a lot of my students that also do pull-out services on top of the inclusion services, but full pull-out is not beneficial to any kids that I've seen. So when I read the article about the roles of principals in successful inclusive schools, the one thing that I took away from is I wish our principals would go over their expectations for inclusion services and what's happening in schools, because it comes to, well, I don't know, they're just too low for this class and I don't know what to do with them, so I'm just going to put them over on the side and give them something that's not even the same. But yet, as their SPED case manager, I don't know this is happening because I'm not always able to go into the classes. I send the teacher aides, and it's not their job to know what they're supposed to be doing or not. So, unfortunately, sometimes it gets lost. However, inclusivity forces a teacher to rethink their lessons to include everyone. I know even when I get my second grade kids, I have 8 different kids at 3 different ability levels. And in order to teach that one lesson, I have to differentiate. But doing those different differentiation pieces all within that one lesson, it gives the kids something fun to do, and they know how to do some of it. And basically, I get better lessons because I have to think through those things. Learner profiles that they talked about in article number 7. We are a Leader in Me school, and one thing that Leader in Me really uses a lot of is leadership binders. And the leadership binders that our school has implemented with our Leader in Me program follow those learner profiles that they talk about to help build an inclusive school culture. So it made me feel really good to know that my particular elementary school, we are on track for this. We need to work together to support all students. Their students are not mine. They're not yours. They are our students. Every kid that walks through that door, whether I teach them or not, I believe is my student, and I want our building to be the best for all of them. So in that inclusive setting, all children feel safe and they have a sense of belonging. All children are included no matter the disability and the skill level. However, looking at one of the articles, when they talked about the different kids, and I'm thinking about the Jamies in the world, I've had a few Jamies in my career that, those are the kids that touch your heart and that you love and you become very protective of. And when they go into a gen ed class and they're treated badly because they don't have the abilities that the other kids have, or they're incapable of doing the current work the other kids are doing, so they just kind of push them aside and they're not included at all. They're just in the class. That's very harmful, and I've heard from some of my students that they don't like it because they feel like they're treated differently, and that is something that we need to work on as a whole. So what do we do with those teachers? How, as a building leader, what can I do to make sure that doesn't happen? And if it does happen, what kind of solutions can we come up with so that teachers feel more comfortable, students feel more comfortable, and the inclusive setting is working as it should? Inclusion involves all the adults in the school. I mean, we have to start from the administration. Our custodial workers worked really hard with me this year with some of my higher needs kids, getting them leadership roles within our building. Our cafeteria workers, our counselors, our ESL teachers, everyone works together for a common goal for, again, every student and adult, for that matter, that walks through our building. We all want our schools to be the best. We all want our kids to learn the most. And in order to do that, we need to include everyone. So for an inclusive school culture, it's defined as everyone learning side by side, no matter the needs. And all adults, as I said, need to be involved. The staff, the parents, community members are a great resource in helping getting some inclusive things for students that may not get them otherwise. I know I've been able to get some resources that I need from our community members. Just even something as simple as having sand donated so that I have some more textural things for my kids. Inclusive education is the different and diverse students are learning all together in the same classroom, and all students, regardless of their ability, learn together in one classroom. Again, I am a believer that there sometimes needs to be some pull-out services, but inclusive education is in the best interest of all students. For inclusive leadership, that can be defined as effective inclusion leaders recognize and embrace the need to make systemic changes, examine the systems and challenge them when needed without bias or causing harm. I have several times walked into an administrator's office with a problem, and I have felt like there were biased answers. The answers did not only cause me harm, but cause the children harm. And we need to create an environment where everyone works together. So again, just working together, making sure everyone feels welcome, from your staff to your students, all helps in inclusive leadership. So our school leaders' roles in school culture is you need to communicate. Expectations especially. Again, what are the roles of principals in successful inclusive schools? It really stuck out to me. The principal in a staff meeting stating, this is what I believe, this is what my expectations are, this is what I'm going to do to follow up with those and to make sure these expectations are being met. I believe the school leader also then needs to live those expectations. You can't expect somebody to do something you're not willing to do yourself. We need to regularly review expectations, and you need to be sure they're being met. There are too many times that we can go in and say, listen, I know for a fact this teacher is not doing this. I've talked to them about it. I've given them ideas. This is still not happening for my student. What do I do? And it's just kind of pushed under the rug, and well, is that a priority? Well, when we go to, no, these are not priorities, we don't have to review these expectations, and it's okay if they're not being met, then that leads to nothing gets met, and we all know how that goes. Again, the biggest role in creating an inclusive school culture is communicate. You have got to have good communication skills. If people in your building do not know what is happening, when it is happening, and for that matter, why it is happening for a lot of things, they're not going to be inclusive. They're not going to come to work excited. They're not going to be on your team. So make sure that whatever you do, as far as anything, you need to communicate what is happening. As far as encouraging advocacy, I don't know how you become a special education teacher without being an extreme advocate. I advocate daily for my students hard. I want them to have the best things they can have. I understand staff constraints and time constraints, but I still need them to have the very best experience they can have each day. We all know that tensions and things like that happen, and it doesn't necessarily happen, but that is the goal. So you need to build relationships so your staff knows you're willing to go to bat for them. You cannot be wishy-washy. I've also had that too many times. Principals did not advocate for their building. They did not advocate for their teachers, and they just got pushed aside, and that doesn't create a good culture at all. I think administrators also need to encourage your staff to advocate for themselves and their colleagues, the same as they do for their students. I never thought about that. How often do I advocate for what we need? And do I do it the same with the passion that I advocate for what my students need? Because quite often what I need is what's going to get my students what they need. So am I advocating for the adults in our building as well as I'm advocating for the students? There needs to be equitable treatment of staff and students. So after reading these articles and using my teaching experience, I believe the best way to ensure equitable treatment of staff and students is putting building-wide policies into place. For several years, we have been following Capturing Kids' Hearts, so we do a social contract a lot of the times at the beginning of the school year for our staff meetings and such. However, the problem is, same as I was speaking of before, policies are not reviewed and they're not enforced. Now, part of that is for us to be able to say, hey, it says on our thing to not have side conversations, and I can't understand what is happening. I can't hear. Can you please stop talking? When that same person talks every single meeting, at what point is it the administration needs to step in and they need to say, this is what our policies are. These are what we have in place. This is what you need to follow. And I also believe it needs to be a direct, especially if I see Mrs. Jones is consistently doing this, I need to talk to Mrs. Jones, not send out a blanket email to the whole building that says, please don't do this, because then you don't know, well, am I doing it? Obviously, it's not that important, because if it was me, they would tell me. I believe you need to go to the source, and I feel like equitable treatment of staff and students is very important, because when you have favorites, people notice it, and I have seen that lead to lack of trust for administration. To change negative assumptions, the best way that I have found to change that, especially about inclusion, is to show the results. Having case studies and data showing growth from students that everyone knows, especially those Jamies of the building, and how the inclusion works for them, that changes staff's minds so much faster than any other thing you can do. When you show them, hey, you guys all know this kid. This is what we're seeing in the classroom. These are the good things that are happening. Everyone wants to be a part of those good things. And in order to you need to just have a positive attitude when presenting new information, but have the data to back up your ideas. And that's the best way to begin changing those negative thoughts. So for my correlation, I feel like that it gave me a better understanding of the standard because many of the articles relayed many ideas and examples of building an inclusive culture in a responsible community, or a culturally responsible community, excuse me. And when I was reading and summarizing each articles, I looked up specific paces that I learned that I can use when not only just taking a higher building leadership role than I have now, but also in my classroom and day to day with just my colleagues. This was very relevant to my learning because I'd not thought before about what I do with inclusions and different things that I do for my students. How can I use those things to make sure my staff feels the same? So with that, I mean, I go out of my way to make sure that every single one of my kids on an IEP knows that they are loved, that they are believed in, and that somebody has their back at school. This needs to happen with the staff as well. It also supported my theory that gen ed teachers need better training on differentiation and what that looks like. Just throwing a high, medium, low activity is not necessarily differentiating for students, and unfortunately that is what most teachers know, so some better training for them would really help them. I also believe that our administration in this district, from top down, believes in inclusive education. So you need to have everyone on board, but we need to have everyone on board with training those gen ed teachers. They want the kids to be in the classroom. They believe that that's the way that it should be. But we also have to remember that board members don't necessarily actually know how education works. Some of them are former educators. A lot of them are parents. They don't understand why this training would be needed. That's what the special ed teachers are for. So if we can get the top down to look at gen ed teachers and get some of that training as far as inclusion and differentiation, I think we would be in a great spot in our district. Inclusion is something that's very dear to my heart. I believe in this process and the results that it shows me year after year. Looking at this through the lens of a principal and not a teacher has shown me new ways and given me new ideas to ensure that all teachers feel included as well. I can also use what I read to encourage teachers to offer more inclusive environments to their students. When I have a building leadership role, whether that is principal or assistant principal, I will have more of the freedom. We do weekly PDs, and although we are often asked about what do we think we need to be trained on, the follow through with that has never, in my experience, been very good. So it would be nice for me to be able to say, hey, once a quarter, this is what we're doing, and get some of those sped things into gen ed classes so that all students are learning and everybody's classroom and school environments are welcoming to everyone. The rest of it is my references. If you have any questions for me, of course, please leave them, and I'm excited to see what you all learned as well. Have a great day.